Let's have a quick look at Kuwait, because the Kuwait oil fires, now we discussed this on the show on Saturday again, and it's something that intrigued me. It's what led to Iraq War 1, with the oil fires starting apparently by Saddam's troops invading. But you were there, you were working for Schlumberger, an oil company at the time in Kuwait. What really went on?
Yeah, I was actually based in Dubai, but my remit meant that I had responsibility right across the Middle East, and that included Kuwait. And I was up in Kuwait just 2 days after hostilities came to an end, with a few other colleagues from the oil field. And, I mean, what we were up there for was to look at the logistics of what it was going to take to put the fires out. And at the time, of course, we'd all been told through CNN that the fires were started by the retreating Iraqi troops. Well, I was driving around the southern oil fields with our military escort, but the evidence led me to question the official version of events. And, I was also aware by that time that April Glaspie, who was the U.S. ambassador to Iraq at the time in 1990, just a few days before Kuwait was invaded by Saddam, she met with Saddam and told Saddam basically that she was not, or the U.S. government, and she specifically stated that Secretary of State James Baker had instructed her to tell Saddam that the U.S. was not going to get involved in Arab issues. Well, the Arab issues were Saddam had become aware that the oil companies, the oil personnel working for the Kuwait Oil Company, were actually tapping into Iraqi oil and bleeding off oil that was actually on Iraqi territory. And obviously he wasn't very happy about it. So, Saddam believed he was being given the green light by the U.S., who he thought were his ally, because obviously they'd supported Iraq throughout the Iran-Iraq war, although, of course, it later became apparent they'd also supported Iran to keep the war going. So he thought he had the green light. He walked into Kuwait, fell for the bait, hook, line, and proverbial sinker. Well, at the end of the war, when he was flushed out of Kuwait, the world was told that Saddam had set the wells alight. But what I saw in the oil fields there was many of the wells were surrounded by Iraqi troops, dead Iraqi troops, the official account. And I can honestly say, Ross, that actually, the April Glaspie event, and then what I saw for myself in Kuwait, was the first time, and I was 34 years of age, and it was the first time that I really had cause to question the, if you like, the official version of events, of anything. And, I shared my concerns with some of my colleagues, and, word obviously got out, and I was visited in the mess, when I was sitting down to my dinner one evening by this 300-pound gorilla in battle fatigues. And he came over and he said, "You Ian Crane?" And before I didn't even get to answer, he just sat down and he said, "I hear you've been casting some aspersion about who set their wells alight." And again, I didn't even get a chance to answer, and he just said, "Boy," and I love that. He said, "Boy," because he was about 3 years younger than me. He said, "Boy, that's the kind of thinking that can get you into a whole lot of trouble." And, I was just gobsmacked. And then he stood up, went to walk away, and then he turned around and said, "What's the matter, Ian? Aren't we paying you enough?" So, I basically sort of just pushed it into the back of the memory and, got on with the job, as it were. But in 2002, I actually came across some correspondence that had been exchanged with one of the Veterans Associations in the U.S. And the Veterans Associations basically admitted that they had received information from their members that it was the U.S. Special Forces that had set the Kuwaiti oil wells alight. And of course, the immediate question is, well, why would they do that? Well, in reality, of course, people quickly forget, but at the time, the oil industry was in a bit of a recession. So this provided $7 billion worth of work for the U.S. oil industry.
Well, there's your answer.
It also meant that the Kuwaiti oil was kept off the market. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the whole charade over Iraq for the last almost 20 years now has been about keeping Iraqi oil in the ground.
Mm.
You know, all this myth that is put out about peak oil, I mean, it is for the gullible. You know, it is for the people that really have a very, very superficial awareness of the oil industry. You know, it's people who totally take on board all the received wisdom that's put out in the mainstream media. The only reason that we have high oil prices is political manipulation. It has nothing to do with any physical shortage. The closest you get to having a physical shortage is on refining capacity. It has nothing to do with actually getting it out of the ground.